Hello, welcome everyone to our Wednesday night Facebook Lives. We are also streaming today on YouTube again. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here for Stern Law every Wednesday night. We're here to talk about some different immigration topics and answer your questions. We will be answering questions in both Spanish and English today. Probably the bulk of this week's will be in English, but we'll touch on some topics in Spanish as well. Pero si están viendo, vamos a hablar nuestro tema más que todo en inglés hoy, pero vamos a tratar de incluir un poco de español y estamos aquí para responder a cualquier pregunta en inglés o español. Si quieren poner sus preguntas en lo que estamos aquí. Creo que ojalá ya nos conocen. Yo soy la abogada María Batres, aquí con la abogada Jessica Luna. Hola, Jessica.
Hola, hola, buenas tardes.
Good to see you, Jessica. So we're here to talk specifically today about U visas. Many of you have heard of U visas. Some of you are have applied for U visas, and we get a lot of questions about if our clients are eligible for it, what it involves. So we're going to start today with just a little background on what the U visa is. And so, Jessica, can you give a little guidance on what the U visa is and who might be eligible or how you become eligible?
Yes, absolutely. So a U visa is really set aside for victims of certain crimes who have suffered either mental or physical abuse and are helpful to law enforcement or government officials in either investigating or the prosecution of that criminal activity. But the key for the U visa really is reporting the crime that you have been a victim of. So it's really meant to incentivize people without status or non-citizens to come forward and report crimes to the police.
Absolutely. And where we see this come from, for those of you who don't know the background, unfortunately, we see in our communities that oftentimes undocumented communities are targeted for crimes because there is a fear or a concern about reporting things to police. So we sometimes, and we began to see years ago when the U visa process started, that was a problem, and people weren't reporting or weren't showing up to court because of those concerns. So this program was created for those who have suffered as victims of crime so that they can also find justice with a little bit more protection. And so, what are the steps, Jessica, for getting a U visa?
Yeah, well, there are a few requirements that you need to be aware of. So first, you really have to be a victim of a qualifying crime. Now, if you are a parent or guardian of someone who has been a victim, then you may be eligible as well, but it's a little complicated. So if you call for a consultation, we can help explain whether or not you are eligible as a parent or guardian of somebody who has been a victim. Another important thing is that the applicant has to have suffered some physical or mental abuse as a result of being the victim of that activity. And the victim has to be helpful to law enforcement in investigating that prosecution. So that really entails having a police report, reporting the crime, giving your testimony, and if it does get prosecuted, being available at the very least to assist in that prosecution. Another really important thing to keep in mind is that the U visa only applies to certain crimes, and they have to have been committed in the U.S. So we can really help you determine whether the crime that you have been unfortunately a victim of, whether that it makes you eligible for a U visa.
And so qualifying crimes is something that you want to have an attorney help assess with because generally where you'll definitely see eligibility for U visas will be for crimes that involve serious physical harm or physical danger. So we tend to see qualifying crimes including what are called felonious assaults that are a felony. So usually, for example, an armed robbery, you were held up, you were beaten in a robbery of some sort. Sometimes it can also include domestic violence. been a victim of domestic violence, even if it doesn't rise to the felony level. So it can also be in certain elements victims of certain types of fraud or other types of harm that can be caused to you. So we as the attorneys or any attorney that you speak to will help assess based upon what was charged either on the police report or by the prosecutors if they did catch someone. And so it's definitely worth, if you've been a victim of a crime, to reach out to us so that we can assess that. And
Yep.
what would they bring to us, Jessica, or what type of information do we need to know to help find out if we can, if there's a qualifying crime that's eligible?
Yeah, so we would need to know a wide variety of things. Every county in Georgia has a different system for how they certify or, tell us that, yes, this crime happened, and how they're willing to work with us. So what we would need is the information of where the crime occurred. A police report is very helpful with this, and really just information and any background of what happened, how you have been helpful. If the case has gone into, if the prosecutor has started the case, or if the investigation has led to a prosecution, any victim advocate information from the prosecutor that you have would also help us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And with the U visa, that first step, as Jessica mentioned, is the certification. So we reach out, or you can reach out to the law enforcement agency. So that can be a police department that actually took the report. It could potentially be the prosecutor's office if the case was actually someone was arrested and it was prosecuted. And there are sometimes other organizations that can serve as certified law enforcement agencies to sign the document, and they are not granting you a U visa. Okay. And that's something that we're constantly also trying to help explain to law enforcement, is all that they're acknowledging or certifying is that you assisted in and were willing to assist in the investigation. And that could be as in you gave your statement. If you were called in for court, did you arrive if you were needed? Now, is it required, Jessica, that somebody have gone to court and somebody be convicted necessarily for a U visa?
It is not required. So the standard is really that you are helpful, will be helpful, and just make yourself available to that help. So if you were to report the crime, give your testimony, and the police or a prosecutor never reaches out to you, then that is plenty. You've been helpful. Now, if it does go to the level of prosecution and they reach out, you do have to make yourself available to whatever they need. That really shows that you have been helpful in investigating or prosecuting the crime.
And the benefit of that as well is that you also obtain justice, right? So you hopefully hold someone responsible for the harm which they committed to you. So in terms of that first step, let's say I get the certification, what are the benefits, or how does the U visa application itself for the actual document work, and what can it get me?
So once the certification is obtained, you move on to the step of doing the U visa application as a whole. And with the U visa application, you are able to get a work permit during the time that your application is pending, but it ultimately could result in a lawful permanent residency.
Awesome. That's great. And the other good thing that is helpful with the U visa is the U visa has the eligibility for a special waiver. It's called a 192 waiver. And this is a process because of the harm and the difficulties and the emotional and physical harm that someone has suffered. One of the things that's created with the U visa is the possibility to be granted a waiver for many things which otherwise might bar you from getting a green card. Occasionally multiple entries, prior convictions, as long as they're not a danger to the community or a terroristic act, things like that. It can also forgive things like any sort of prior violations, entries on false documents, etc. Now, you do have to be open and truthful, and this is where an attorney really can help you make sure that you've done everything you need to do in the proper way for the U visa. But if that waiver is granted, where that helps is, as Jessica said, you can get your green card. And so it can forgive many of those things.
We do have a question here, Maria.
Yes.
So it says, can you guys talk about reporting crimes overall? We've heard people say that there have been victims but are afraid to call the police because they don't have legal status. If I witness a crime happening to someone else, can I also benefit from the U visa?
That's a great question. So, absolutely, you should report the crime, but we know that for a lot of people, it's scary. Especially, for example, here in Georgia, what we see right now is that we have the new law, HB 1105, where when someone is going to be arrested by the police, their status is going to be checked and they could be referred to ICE. That law, HB 1105, specifically states that this is not applicable to victims or witnesses of crimes. So you should not be in danger of the officers, if you're reporting a crime and being honest and open and doing what you need to do under the law. There should not be a requirement that they verify your status, that they will contact ICE, that they should submit to you. If you find that happen, reach out to us, right? Let us assist you in that type of case. But law enforcement also benefits from being able to prevent crime and to lower crime. That's their goal. Is ultimately their goal should be and is to make the community safer. And so that should be something that we hopefully will encourage. Okay. If you are afraid of going and having to answer questions, you certainly can reach out to an attorney and we can assist you with that and give you some guidance on the best way to do that. But don't wait to report. If you've been the victim of a crime, if you're a victim of domestic violence, anything, your safety is of course most important. But we hope, we know this is going to be hard for many people, but that's part of as well the reason the U visa is here. And I'm going to answer that in Spanish as well, just because I think this is a really good point. Tenemos una pregunta de mucha gente quiere reportar una visa U y tienen miedo porque dicen, por ejemplo, la nueva ley en Georgia es una que están chequeando estatus, puede ser que me manden a ICE. La ley oficialmente, la nueva ley en Georgia oficialmente tiene una sección que dice que eso no califica basado si uno es víctima o testigo de un crimen, que no hay una necesidad que los oficiales hagan un chequeo de su estatus legal y que manden a ICE, ¿verdad? Obviamente, si está cometiendo algún delito, ¿verdad? O si tiene miedo de qué va a decir o qué puede pasar, nos puede llamar y podemos asistirlos, puede tener un abogado para asistirle en ese proceso, pero sí les sugerimos, no solamente por la visa U, pero si usted es víctima de un crimen, es importante que se mantenga seguro, que encuentre justicia por eso. Entonces, ojalá que eso les ayude a dar un poco de confianza en reportar. Okay. We have another question on Facebook, and we're going to answer all of these. These are great questions. I'm going to focus on one right here for the U visa. So you talked about, Jessica, applying. Once you have the certification, you can apply for the U visa and get these benefits. Here's a great question. Is it possible to include any relatives if you apply for a U visa?
It is possible. Now, there's certain relatives and certain qualifying family that you can add as a beneficiary or derivative to your application. Generally, if the applicant had been a victim and they are married, legally married, their partner could potentially be a derivative on that application. There are also possibilities for children to be derivatives on the application. It depends. So we can help you understand who all can benefit from this one application.
Great. Thank you. All right, we have another U visa question here that kind of touched on what you were also just talking about. So, can you turn into a resident after having the U visa, or do you have to renew it every certain time? So yes, you can. The U visa, once it is approved, you can have the U visa status for 3 years and maintain your presence in the U.S. during those 3 years. And during that time, you're protected somewhat under the U visa from deportation. So as long as you don't commit any crimes, do anything that violates the rules, at the end of that 3 years, you can apply for your green card. And then you can get an extension on the U visa if the green card is taking some time. So there are options to have that protection under the U visa, that deferred action, while you get to the point where you can adjust. The goal and the best thing about it is they do have that waiver. So we do find with most of our clients, if they get everything waived and they get everything approved on the waiver, then they have that opportunity. There's no need to keep renewing the U visa because we can hopefully move to the adjustment of status. And so where the longest waiting period, we'll be upfront and honest about this, is in the actual U visa approval, which right now is taking about 10 years. But Jessica, what is it a protection? Like, does it keep you from getting deported, or is there any benefit with the U visa if perhaps something happens and you do get deported while it's pending?
There are protections while it's pending. The biggest is that during that time, you have the work permit, but it will shield you. You have this pending application with USCIS. So it is a shield against any immigration proceedings.
And if you do get deported while you have a U visa pending, or even if you have to leave, you have to go home for any reason, you have sick family members, there's a necessity to leave, inform us as your attorneys so that we can help you. But a U visa has the ability, if it is granted and you continue to follow the rules and keep it maintained, it actually can help you return to the U.S. We have applicants who have left the U.S. and are applying or in process of awaiting their U visas. And then if and when they get those approved, they will be allowed back into the United States. So it's also a path that you can file for from outside the United States. So the U visa is really a wonderful opportunity to give some help and assistance to people who suffered something at the hands of another person, who suffered in a crime at the hands of another person. And so it's really beneficial to a lot. Okay, next question about the U visa. Is there any interview for the U visa? Do you want to take that, Jessica?
Yeah, I believe for the U visa, there is USCIS may require you to attend an in-person interview. That interview can take place if you are within the United States at your local USCIS office, or at an embassy or consulate if the applicant is outside of the US applying from overseas.
Absolutely. And then our hope is that you won't. There are some people who get it without the interview, and that's another good reason to have an attorney, because if everything that you need to have submitted for that U visa is there, and that includes sworn statements, the evidence of what happened, the documentation you need for the waiver. Sometimes when USCIS is trying to move things more quickly, you might just get the approval, but we always like to prep people that you may have an interview, you may have some questions about it. But I also want to be clear, the U visa application is a confidential application. It goes to a separate section of USCIS with specially trained officers for these kind of cases, which is part of why they take so long. So, rest assured, the people who are reviewing this are presumably well-trained to understand the difficulties that you're going through in this type of situation, even if they do call you in for an interview. Okay. All right. So we'll start back at some of the top questions, and then we'll see what else comes in. This is great. Keep sending your questions, keep watching, sharing. All right. So here's one, a little different topic. Would I lose eligibility for the Biden law if I was deported, even if I am married to a USC for more than 10 years? Do you mind if I take that one, Jessica?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I've actually been doing a lot of research for the firm on the Biden law because I do a lot of the consultations. So I've spoken with many of you about this. First update is we're still waiting to know the exact details about this new law. We anticipated it would be early August because supposedly they're accepting applications on August 19th. We're now hearing it will probably be the 18th or 19th before we find out the actual details. So, what I can tell you is if you have a prior order of deportation, that can be a bar to getting your green card. So, it's certainly something that you need to have an attorney look at, because now that this new opportunity is presenting itself, and if you meet all the other qualifications, you don't have any disqualifying crimes, you're otherwise admissible to the United States, you got married before the June 24th or June 17th date, the date of the marriage, to a U.S. citizen, there's a possibility where if you're now eligible for a new relief that you weren't eligible for when you got the order, we might be able to reopen your case so that you could apply for that new element. So this is where, again, having an attorney, calling any attorney and asking about your history is going to be helpful. As this new law comes out, the doors aren't shut. There's always ways to look into options. I can't guarantee right here in your situation that would be able to be reopened, but we certainly see hope for that, because as new opportunities arise, the courts do allow in certain circumstances to reevaluate something that happened in the past and allow you to then move forward with that new process. So I think that's a really important question.
To bounce off of that, Maria, I have a lot of clients that ask me, they're clients that are eligible for advanced parole, and they want to know if they should wait or possibly, do the new Biden plan parole in place instead. So what would you say to those clients?
So right now we are a little uncertain about what the fate of the Biden immigration plan will be. As we've seen in the last few years, when new plans come out that aren't laws passed through Congress, but that are executive actions, they come just from the president and the executive branch. What we found is, unfortunately, a lot of people who are opposed to opening up certain doors to immigration file lawsuits saying that it is an illegal process, that it doesn't follow the regulations, and so that will stop the case. So we don't know. We're hoping that's not going to happen. We're going to move forward. We're going to file the applications. We're going to fight. But if you have another option like advanced parole, and you've already started that process, it also may be beneficial because we don't know how long this new process will take. Okay. And so if you have an option with the advanced parole of already you have your DACA, you have your passport, and you have sick family members or the reasons you need to go, talk with your attorney about both options and see which is best. Because you may also have some risks if, let's say, you have some sort of pending criminal case, and it might be more beneficial for you to not travel outside the United States. But don't rule out your other options because of this new plan. What we're hoping is this is going to give new options for people so that you can then make the decision about what's best for your family. That's a great question. Okay, so let's try and go through. We're getting a lot of questions. All right, so let me see. I think we did that one. Beneficiaries for the process of U visa. I think we talked about that question as well. Thank you so much, Demi, Soribel, Danitza. Great questions. Let's see. We did the interview. We did, and just to touch, we did main eligibility requirements. So main eligibility is being a victim of what can be determined to be a qualifying crime, that you were helpful in the situation, and then that's the starting point for eligibility. It's very open in terms of other elements because there is that waiver, but call an attorney and make sure that this is a case for you. Okay. Ok, esto solo un poco en español. Jessica, cuando le aprueban la visa U, creo que hablamos un poco de eso. ¿Qué es el próximo paso? ¿Qué tanto tiempo tiene uno que esperar para el próximo paso?
Con una visa U pueden esperar como 3 años con la visa antes de que puedan aplicar para convertirse en residente. Y durante ese trabajo veo que también tenemos otra pregunta que dice, ¿la visa U me permite obtener un permiso de trabajo? Sí, durante el tiempo, si la solicitud de la visa está presentada con inmigración, sí es posible obtener el permiso durante ese tiempo que esté pendiente la aplicación.
Ok, muchas gracias. Gracias a Michelle por las preguntas. Jorge, let's see. Okay, good question. Let's switch a little criminal. If I have a DUI, but I've been here for close to 20 years now, married to USC, will I qualify? If so, will the DUI make it harder for me to apply for the new law? So the DUI will not prevent you. It is not a disqualifying crime to getting a green card. So that's the good news. As long as there's, we don't know the details of your case, but as long as there's no harm to another person, it doesn't rise to that level. Where it might play a role is the parole in place, which is how we presume they will be the first step of this, will be discretionary. Meaning that the officer can look at your entire criminal history and decide whether or not to grant it to you. One DUI, depending how long ago it was, what the situation was, and if that's all you have, then we as attorneys are going to help you balance out that with the positives and the benefits and the things you've done since then. So it won't necessarily disqualify you. So that's great news. And our hope is it's not going to make it harder. It just means we want to make sure that we are upfront about everything and we provide that and balance it out. We always like to balance the negatives with the positives.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to go with an immigration lawyer that really understands how criminal past convictions affect your current application. Since we have that specialized knowledge, we're able to advocate for you in a way that really puts forth that good moral character, and we're able to argue on your behalf for that as well.
Awesome. Okay. Okay, so then let's go down to Michelle. Thank you for the follow-up question. ¿Qué tipo de evidencia necesito para presentar o obtener la visa U? Jessica, y me imagino que es tal vez ya cuando tiene la certificación. ¿Qué tipo de evidencia se incluye con la aplicación de la visa U? Usted habló un poco de tiene que demostrar si ha sufrido algún harm o ¿verdad? Efectos del crimen.
Mental, físico, tiene que enseñar que ha sufrido de parte del delito físicamente o tiene cualquier de efectos mentales. Igual hay muchas evidencias que requerimos. María, ¿qué más se necesitaría, María?
Y también detalles, ¿verdad? Actas de nacimiento, si está incluyendo familia, información de sus arrestos, de sus antepasados, porque sí, igual con el perdón se incluye eso, ¿verdad? Porque también con casi cualquier elemento de inmigración hay un lado de discreción, donde el oficial tiene que revisar todo. Pero nosotros le asistimos con juntar toda la documentación. A veces aún demostramos el efecto en su familia que tuvo con el crimen y que sufriría sin ellos, ¿verdad? Entonces, nosotros nos encargamos de asistirle con toda la documentación que necesita para completarlo. Y siempre, si uno le falta algo, UCIS nos avisa si quieren algo de nuevo. Nos mandan una pedida de más evidencia si hace falta.
Igual cada caso requiere diferente tipo de evidencias o puede depender.
Ya, exacto. Okay. Gracias, Demi, por esta pregunta. If I'm in the process of obtaining a visa, am I still at risk of being deported? And can I get any protection? So I'm going to start answering this as I think you're thinking of the U visa, just since that's our topic. If you're in the process of obtaining a U visa, there is still a risk of being deported. We've seen recently many judges will hold or pause immigration proceedings for the U visa approval, but it's not guaranteed. So there is a possibility, or if you commit a crime that puts you into removal proceedings, that still has to be fought and assessed, and we have to defend that case. But in many cases, if you've already received what's called the bona fide status, which is a work authorization that you get while it's pending, many times that will help because you can then obtain a license. You might not be arrested on certain charges, etc. So that's one type of protection that you have. The other type of protection is if for some reason you end up getting deported for, even if it's a new crime that you haven't been pardoned for yet, that can be included in an additional pardon, and you can come back if the U visa ends up being granted. So where it may not be like some of the other policies, and especially potentially under the new administration, under the last administration, they were not allowing time for people to have their U visas granted. They were making them leave and wait. That's rare lately, but it is a possibility. But once you have that work card, that bona fide status, so the sooner we can apply for you, the sooner we get to that, it's going to offer a great deal of protection from hopefully being put in immigration custody. Okay. All right. Can I apply for a U visa if I was convicted of a crime but later became a victim of a crime? You want to answer this? I think we've kind of talked about this, but Jessica?
We did briefly talk about that, and it really depends on the crime. Generally, you are still able to apply for the U visa, even though you have been convicted of a previous crime.
Excellent.
But it is very important to, have all of the details so we can tell you for certain whether or not that specific crime is disqualifying.
Awesome. These have been great questions. And Jessica, are there any we've missed on the other places where we look at questions?
Do that now.
I think we got one more that I'll just follow up on that we talked about, and I'll even answer this one in Spanish. So Demi wanted a clarification. So it's possible to apply for the U visa even if you're outside the U.S. Absolutely. If you've had to leave the U.S., but you were a victim of a crime, or you've been deported and were the victim of a crime, you can call us. We work with people all over the world, and we can assist in getting the certification. If you met that requirement of reporting the crime, being helpful, so absolutely call us, because this can be a path towards bringing you back with lawful status and with the hopes of getting your residency. So absolutely. La pregunta era si se puede hacer la aplicación de la visa U aunque esté afuera de los Estados Unidos. Y sí, claro que sí. Si usted califica en todas las otras reglas de la visa U y saca su certificación, se puede retornar con la visa U. Y nosotros trabajamos con muchos clientes en otras partes del mundo para asistir, y le podemos hacer el trabajo de obtener la certificación porque usted está fuera del país, etcétera. Entonces llámenos a hacer una consulta. Okay. All right. So we're past 7:30. I think, Jessica, is there anything you want to add?
I think this was a very fruitful live today. There's no more questions on my end. So thank you all for your time. It has been a pleasure answering your questions.
Absolutely. And if you have more, place them in the chat and we'll try and get back to you. Or you can send them to us in a private message if they have more details. Obviously, we don't want you sharing your personal details on a public forum. So we are available, and you can also call for a consultation. And we look forward to having you here next week and seeing what our next topic is going to be. All right. Have a good night.
Bye.